This is the guest of FILOTV, Michał Szczepanek. Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Mr. Iain Miskimmin, Digital Advisor at Bentley Systems, Director at Comit Projects and British Army, Reservist and Captain. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure to be here talking to your fellow students here today.
Mr. Miskimmin, how did it all start?
Oh, blimey. I've got to admit, it all started by not being particularly academically bright. I'm not the best student in the world. I get a feeling that my exam results and my school reports were very disappointing to my parents. But I think that might be down to very much not really being, I think school never is quite set up to talk to everybody, to communicate with everybody and to bring the best out of everybody. It's very, to me, I think it's a little bit narrow focused. Yes, I was advised that I would get no exam results of any worth and not really progress very far in the world. But I think the key thing for me is that people believed in me. And I think there are two things that I brought into my early careers which stood me in good stead and made me stand out amongst my peers so I could be where I am today. And I think that's energy and enthusiasm. I can take the most clever and competent person in the world, and if they have no energy or enthusiasm to do the job, then it's never going to happen. But I can take somebody who really wants to be there, wants to do things, has the energy to get on and really go for it, and then the enthusiasm to drive the people around them and bring them up as well, then I think that's a really good set of skills to have. So, you know, with all of those things, each of them started pretty much by accident. So my reservist career started back in 1992, so a long time ago now. And I didn't actually mean to join the British Army Reserves at all. My dream at school, my absolute dream, was to be a fast jet pilot. I wanted to be a pilot. Oh my word, I wanted to fly. But the problem is, it turns out I was too thick. I couldn't. I realise now that to be a kind of like a pilot like that, you've got to be able to do calculations in your brain in seconds or microseconds and be able to do all that kind of stuff. That's not my world. I can't do that. So on the way back from the Officers and Aircrew Selection Centre, having failed, of course, I passed the Army Reserve Centre and thought, well, if one lot won't have me, then the other lot will. And I think one of the main things that really drove my early career in that was, and I'll unashamedly say it, was the money. Because I was a student, I had no money at all. And this organisation gave me money to go off and enjoy myself and do things that I was really quite excited to do. They fed me, they gave me cheap beer, and also they gave me a network of friends of similar sort of enthusiasm and drive and energy, which was just absolutely fantastic. So I didn't really mean to join them at all. It was just an impulse. And it's the same thing with Bentley Systems. I didn't actually mean to join Bentley Systems at all originally. So this was back in early 2000. And I was looking for more work in infrastructure engineering because I've been doing design for roads and drainage and things like that. And I applied for many jobs, didn't get anything anywhere. And this company wrote to me and said, come for an interview. They were called Infrasoft at the time. And I got to the interview and we were chatting away a bit. And they said, right, okay, so how long have you been coding in C++? And I'm looking at them going, I've got no idea what you're talking about. Oh, okay, what about Java? I've got no idea. To me, Java is a place in the West Indies. And they go, is this your CV? No, that's not my CV at all. I went, oh, okay. Well, what do you do? And about an hour and a half later, after just chatting around what I was doing, how I did things, they got that sense of energy and enthusiasm, as well as knowledge and professionalism that I can bring to something. And they gave me a job. And here I am 24 years later. I'm still working with them because it's all about the people. People are really important in any job that you do. You need money. Let's not beat about the bush here. The only reason that most of us work is because we need money for food, for putting a roof over our heads, to buy the things we like, to treat the people we love, and that's why we do it. It's a bonus, a real big bonus, if we do it, if we enjoy the people around us, and they make or break something like that. And I think on the commit front, that was another happy accident. My entire career has just been happy accidents, really. I just went along to a meeting, commit early 2004, I think it was, and we were just chatting about various things, learning about innovations, and they said, we're looking for a new chair of the technology companies. I went, oh, I'll do that. And I was the only person who put my hand up. And so my first meeting, I was elected chair of the technology. And I've never looked back. I'm still there. So they've all sort of happened through fortuitous accidents, I suppose. And I think that's one of the things, if you know your history quite well, I'm sure your dad has driven the history into your world. One of a quote from Napoleon, not a great guy, but an interesting quote, was, is he a good soldier? I don't really care if he's a good soldier. Is he lucky? If he's lucky, then I'll promote him and he can become a general. The thing with luck, I think, as we all know, is the more you practice, the more you study, the more you rehearse, the more lucky you get. If you see what I mean, you can stack your luck with you. So yes, after a much long-winded, that's how it all started.
Okay, and you are reservist in British Army Royal Engineers. What do you do, and what have you done in the past, apart from meeting people and earning the money and everything? And what would you do in case of natural disasters or war?
So I didn't start my career in the Royal Engineers. I started with the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. So it was an infantry unit. And they were great fun, and they were just literally boots on the ground. My first sort of role there was with the sustained fire team, which is basically a machine gun platoon. Learning all of the technical capabilities of the machine gun and carrying some pretty heavy bits of kit. I mean, they were huge, and I was really small as a I was quite high. I was 6.5 foot still, but I only weighed 7.5 stone, which is I was a matchstick. You'll have to do the conversion online to tell how many kilograms that is. But it's thin and it's quite small, so carrying a heavy weight was pretty heavy. And I've gone through lots of other units. I briefly served with the New Zealand reservists, then went to REME, so Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, so running a command post to headquarters with drivers and radio operators and armourers and people to fix things. Then back to the infantry to do more about urban operations and subterranean warfare. And now with the Royal Engineers for the last 5 years, I do critical national infrastructure. So my role is around understanding and protecting critical national infrastructure. So we've seen in the in the news, the war in Ukraine and around the world, those who want to disrupt other countries and they want to be not a force for good, that's for sure. The evil people in this world find it's a good way to disrupt somebody's country or to damage their society is by damaging their infrastructure. So how can we, one, protect that infrastructure, and how can we, two, recover that infrastructure after it's been attacked or it's been impacted by a disaster? Because climate change is happening, whether we like it or not. How we deal with that, that's not my world, but it's causing more flooding, more high winds, more natural disasters. And the problem with all that lot is infrastructure doesn't like being underwater, whether that's an electrical substation or a railway or a road or a wastewater treatment works, all the sewage comes up to the surface and then pollutes the land around it. So, that sort of thing, massively important. And my role in the Royal Engineers is to look at critical national infrastructure and understand how to put countries back on their feet again after a disaster. So I quite like the role in there. It's quite good fun. They're a great bunch of people. Most of the reservists I work with are very, very intelligent, way more clever than I am. And it's quite a difference, because I used to be in the infantry world, and let's just say that they're practical people, they're doers in the infantry world, whereas these guys who I work with now it's in the brains. They are very clever, but perhaps not the most practical people when it comes to actually ducking when the rounds start flying.
And are you monitoring the situation in the Ukraine? And does the British Army monitor this situation? And are you worried about the current turn of events?
Oh, yes. Well, the British Army as a whole is involved quite a lot. So if we separate out the state and the British Army, because the British Army isn't political at all. So the state is supporting Ukraine quite a lot with money and arms, whereas the British Army itself is doing a lot with training and equipment. So we got something in the UK called Operation Interflex. And Interflex is all about bringing those who've been conscripted or called up in Ukraine over to the UK and training them in military skills. So, basic things around living in the field, being able to shoot correctly, looking at their urban operations skills, how they can administer themselves in that world and be better at it and survive longer. Teaching things like first aid in the field, because your first aid you're taught at school is quite low level, if you see what I mean. You're taught about put a bandage on a finger, or arm in a sling, or CPR, which is a great thing to do. But this is going to teach them how to deal with catastrophic bleeding and a lot of other injuries that are going to happen in a war zone. So training them and then giving them kit like body armor, helmets, thermal sleeping bags, waterproof jacket, all that kind of stuff. The British Army are supplying out of their current budget. Actually, it's an amazing project or operation to support. And am I worried about the future? God no. If you're not worried, then I think there's something wrong with you. I think everybody needs to be concerned about what is happening in the world at the moment. It's not something necessarily we can do anything about, but we've got to know what's going on, and if there is something we can do to be able to do it. I go back to sort of my first statement right at the very beginning, is the world's got to be a lot kinder to each other. There's a lot of people out there who are, who aren't acting in the best interests of the world or the people around us, and we've got to dial it back a bit and get people into a much more friendly world, I think.
Oh, that would be very, very, very good. And so the next question is about of course, history, because you have a site about the Battle of Dunkirk. You had written a book about it.
Yes.
Why you became so interested in this battle, and can you tell something interesting to us about it that is not well known?
Yeah, so I mean, I became interested in this because of my grandfather. He was a crofter. Well, I suppose let's start at the beginning. He was an orphan growing up in Scotland in the 1920s, 30s, and went off to a farm in the late 30s. The war came along 38, 39 as it started up. So he went off and joined up with the Royal Scots Fusiliers. And so he was involved in the battles around Dunkirk and those actions, which is why I've got a real big interest in it. But during those battles, and at some point, we'll never know how, he was captured by the Germans and was marched and was in one of the Polish prisoner of war camps. It was in a big fort in Thorn. So he spent 5 years as enforced slave labor in Thorn during the war. Made several escapes, trying to escape down the river out to the sea to get to a ship. Never made those escapes, and was eventually liberated in 1945, having been marched from Thorn all the way through to Fallingbostel. Massive, huge distance. Lots of prisoners died because they didn't have enough food or were badly treated by the Germans at the time. So so that's sort of my interest in that world because of my grandfather. But the Scots Fusiliers and the Battle of Dunkirk, I think a lot of people focus on Dunkirk, but they don't necessarily understand that it wouldn't have been possible if but the battles around Arras and Ypres were fought not only by the British but also by the Belgians holding on to the left flank and by the French holding on to the right. A lot of soldiers gave their lives and their freedom to allow Dunkirk to happen. So the miracle itself wasn't just through little ships coming and collecting soldiers off the beach. The miracle itself was a much bigger battle. And what I find absolutely fascinating was that the same battalion, my grandfather's battalion, fought the same action in 1914 there in Ypres as they did in 1940. So as they were digging in 1940 in the Second World War, they were digging in next to the graveyards, which contained thousands of bodies and headstones with their fathers' and grandfathers' names on them. So they were literally fighting the same battle, a rearguard action, where 790 Fusiliers went into that action, only 40 made it out to the beach. So, I mean, many hundreds were killed or captured during those actions. And so that sort of drove me because the records were lost at the time. They were further lost when there was a fire at the Home Headquarters in the 1980s. And I just found that sort of lost history absolutely fascinating. And I've been trying to get the story out there for, it must be best part of 20 years now. So it's what drives me on that. I don't want those stories to be forgotten, because you will have stories from your grandfathers, from your great grandfathers that will be lost. You'll know the history, so you'll know that this battle was fought here, but we don't have the personal stories of the people who were there, that suffered the hardships, that fought valiantly for our freedoms, for our ability to be who we are today. We've lost those personal stories, and it's those personal stories, when you read them and understand them, is, I think, helps us more to understand warfare in today's world, because we're still the same people as such in there. We're still human beings. We still have the same emotions, the same thought process, the same sort of knowledge and skill sets, but we're just in a different era. So if we can understand those back then, we can understand them better now, I think.
Okay, thanks. So we can now change the topic, because you have spoken and you're known from it, speaking about BIM. What is it? And is it only like helpful for corporation, businesses, or can we also embrace it in our lives, in school or something, or someplace like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in and around all of us. So what is it? If it boils down to anything, it boils down to information. We all make decisions day after day after day, whether that decision is, should I catch this bus? Should I spend this money? Should I drive here? Or should I wear my blue shoes today rather than my red ones? We all make decisions, and we all make those decisions based on information. And we need to be able to trust the information that we're using to make that decision. It's like, shall I take an umbrella today? And I need to know that it's raining or it's not, or it is going to rain or it's not going to rain. But I've got to trust the information that I'm looking at. If I can't trust it, there's no point in actually using that information to make a decision. And a decision without making, a decision without information is a guess. You might as well just guess it. So what is that BIM? That BIM is good quality information. So and we see this through any career somebody will have. So if you've got a career in, let's say you're going to be an internet influencer, a social media influencer, your whole world is based on BIM as such. That you think, why is that? Well, it's about information. And that information that social influencer will use will be, what are the things trending at the moment? What do people like? How can I increase my ratings? What are my ratings currently? Where do I need to project them? How am I going to get more money in for doing various things? What is my list of people that I need to influence, the things? So having good quality information means that they can be a social media influencer success. If they have poor information and they make poor decisions, then they're going to be a failure. The same thing if you wanted to be any of the professionals, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or a policeman or a lawyer or an engineer. All of those careers mean you've got to do good quality decisions based on information, whether those information is calculations or drawings or models or data from a suspect or medical data from tests. It's all information, and it's got to be trustworthy. It's got to be correct. And I think you'll probably understand this very well, is the world is full of misinformation at the moment. There's a lot of people out there who, for their own ends, want to push information which is incorrect. And I think if you as a student learn the skills to understand what information you need to make that decision, to be able to validate that and be able to make the decision, is it good information? Is it poor information? Can I trust the veracity of that information? And then be able to manage it, then be able to use it to make decisions, so to analyze it, and then be able to communicate that decision, then whatever career that you pick, it's going to be successful. You'll see the key people out there around the world at the moment are those who understand information and its value, because information has got value. Okay, people sell you information all the time. You might not notice it, but they're selling you information all the time from your apps, whether that information is music, whether that information is news, or feeds about sports or music, whatever it might be, they are making money from that information. And those who hold information and those who manage it and those who can make good decisions based on it are going to be the success around the world. So, tying that back to BIM, what is BIM? BIM is all about making sure you have good information. And so I think, schools need good information to be able to make the decisions about what to teach, when to teach it, how to teach it, how the students are performing, how to get the best out of them, all that sort of thing. There is a huge amount of information that will optimize your learning experience. And then when you get into business, it will optimize your earning potential or your ability to do the maximum amount of work in the shortest amount of time, so you can go off and do the stuff you actually enjoy in life rather than just earning money, which is massively important. Enjoy life. That's the key.
Oh, and you have participated in a project called Class of Your Own, where you teach about the importance of mature information in decision making. Is it about something else also? And how it can help young people interested in a career, for example, in the building sector?
Yeah, so Class of Your Own is part of something called Design, Engineering, Construct. It's a group of, I suppose it's an education group of people who deliver learning and opportunities to schools to learn about engineering information and engineering basically engineering full stop. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that kids in schools actually understand that engineering isn't all about boring people with leather elbow patches and hair coming out their ears. It's kind of like, we're not all dullards in the engineering world. Some of us are quite exciting, and it's about doing interesting projects for them. Like a few years ago, I did a project which was with a group of students, in fact lots of groups of students, about designing a hyperloop station. And it's not about necessarily the engineering behind it. It's about the architecture, the surveying, the ideas. Design a hyperloop station, right? Okay, so how do we design a hyperloop station? So they're able to go and talk to lots of industry specialists, and one of them was me, and I was talking about the critical national infrastructure area. But they also talked to people at various organisations that were able to help them, from people like Network Rail or from Atkins or Mott McDonald's, the big engineering firms. And they designed a hyperloop station, which is fantastic, absolutely amazing. And went through a competition. And then the winners went to Singapore to present their hyperloop station to a really big audience full of industry specialists. Absolutely amazing. We've done ones for designing classrooms. I'm running a session for kids who can understand how to make infrastructure more resilient. So this is a new one I'm going to be launching this year. So the scenario, there is an island with a storm approaching, and lots of infrastructure on the island, lots of people on the island, news reports coming in that the storm's coming in. What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with it? Well, the students have now got to decide which bits of infrastructure are critical, which are vulnerable, what people do we need to evacuate, where do we need to evacuate them to, how are we going to protect those bits of infrastructure. And then the storm hits, and then they've got to also decide how to build it up from there. So it is about collecting information, but critically, it's about making decisions based on that information, and using that information to be able to make those decisions and communicate with people. I think it's one of the really nice things I find with that design, engineer, construct class of your own environment is they teach students how to be more confident in their abilities and be able to communicate clearly. I mean, we sit here and you can communicate confidently and clearly to me, but it's a skill that is missing from a lot of students, because many of them will sit there and just communicate through their phone. Okay, where what we've got to be able to do is, in the real world, is communicate face to face, because then you can see the reaction. You're not hiding behind a keyboard. So to be able to make those decisions, to be able to really express themselves and to communicate clearly and confidently with each other. And in the end, what we'd really like to be able to do is to get those enthusiastic, confident students interested in engineering, because we're losing those skill sets. People don't want to be engineers anymore, and we desperately need engineers in this world. And we need those engineers not just to be people who can, turn a spanner or build a brick wall or whatever it might be. Engineering is a really broad church. Artificial intelligence is going to play a massive part in future engineering. We do a lot around virtual reality. We use drones. We use augmented reality. Loads of technology in the engineering world. It's not just about being cold, wet, and muddy on a construction site in the wind and the rain. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. It's an industry that supports the society we're in, because you can't sit there and use the internet unless somebody has built the electrical substation and runs it. Somebody has built the communications hub and runs it. Somebody has put that network of cables in and maintains them. All these things, we can't do what we are doing now without engineers and infrastructure. And I think, a lot of the things that they do can't be done by sitting here in front of a computer. They need good people to do that, and design, engineering, construct, the class of your own people. Try and drive that and encourage people and show students that there is a better world out there with the engineering world. So yeah, I'm enthusiastic about it. I love to see the next generation come from where they are now, see that spark of enthusiasm appear above the head, the big light bulb, and then go, that's what I want to do. That is so cool. Especially when you go and visit big infrastructure. It's incredible how they built these things, how they maintain them, how they support the society we're in. I suppose that comes back to our conversation about the world we live in at the moment, and Ukraine and the like, and the critical national infrastructure stuff I do with the army. It's the foundation of society. If infrastructure fails, if the engineering fails, society fails, I think.
You're a director of Comit Projects, as we talked before. And what does this? What does it do? What does Comit do?
So Comit helps people to innovate within the construction industry. Construction, very broad church, whether you're in oil and gas, chemicals, whether you're building infrastructure, whether you are building houses. Construction is a very large, broad brush sort of collectoral term. What does it do? It's aimed at helping people to innovate. The problem we have with all those industries is that they can be very conservative, very risk averse. Construction has a very small profit margin. Okay. If you think about most organizations out there, they have a profit margin of around 15 to 20%. Okay. And you think, well, okay, that's okay. Construction earns between 0 and 3% profit on a project. Okay, 3 is really good, by the way. Most of the time, it scrapes along the bottom. So you've got a £15 billion. The rewards can be good, but the risks are huge for a very small return on that investment. And so innovation is desperately needed, but at the same time, it's a risk, because innovation is something different. It's something new. It's something that might work, but it might not. And if we go down it and it doesn't work, then suddenly our 3% might come down to 1%, might come down to 0%, because we've nailed our colours to that particular mast. So construction is very, very conservative, very risk averse. And then you've got the flip side of Commit, which is the technology companies. So lots of technology companies with incredible software, with drones, with new pieces of hardware, whether it's communications satellites, whether it's bits of plant and machinery for scooping out earth in the ground, or tunnel boring machines, or whatever it might be. But the problem is, over the years, they've not got the best reputation in the construction industry, because they like big profits, and they're not always the most supportive in the world. We have a saying in the UK called selling somebody a lemon. Okay, and when you sell them a lemon, it's kind of like, oh, well, that doesn't work, or it doesn't quite work as much as it's supposed to. It's kind of like, if I sold you a car and it looks great on the outside, but actually it hasn't got a steering wheel, and we'll only have a steering wheel in 2 years' time, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so I just spent all this money taking this big risk, and I can't even drive it. And you see that all over the world with big technology rollouts. In the UK, our National Health Service, we had this massive rollout of this big bit of software that was supposed to bring all the data from all over the different regions together. So it would be a really billions of pounds spent. Oh, an absolute lemon. It really was. Somebody made a lot of money and delivered very little. We suffer from that quite heavily in the British Army as well, by the way. We're not perfect when it comes to procuring technology. So, there's this distrust. One, the technology companies don't really trust the construction companies because they haven't got any money to pay the bills, and will pay the bills quite late. And the construction companies don't trust the technology companies particularly because they keep selling them lemons. So what does Commit do? Well, it brings them together and allows them to trust each other in innovations projects. So we'll do a trial about something, we'll prove it actually works, we'll get rid of those lemons, we'll get rid of those cost problems, bring people together, prove it works, prove that return on investment, so they go, oh, actually, it's a really low risk, and I can make 4% rather than 3%. That's not bad. And 1% of a £15 billion project, that's a lot of money. So anything we can do to move that dial just a touch is really important. And that's what the Commit world is. It's a group of people who really are passionate about making the world a better place in that construction world. How can we move it forward? How can we close that gap? How can we make it more profitable for both, more trusting for both? How can we then deliver better value for money to the end user, the public in the infrastructure world, or the people who live in the building, that use the train, that pass through the airport, that use the chemicals to do whatever they need to do, that drive their cars because of the oil and gas, the petrol's in there. So, that's the bottom end of Commit. We're trying to strive to make a better place, but the way we're doing it is by bringing people together and getting to trust each other.
Okay, the last question is, based on your experience, what would you recommend to young people as a choice for their career? Would it be the same as your choices?
Oh, blimey! Now I've been asked this a couple of times, and I'm it's really difficult to predict the future. If somebody said 5 years ago, what are going to be the, what are the careers that people need to head towards? My answer is completely different from what it is now, because technology has moved on massively. The world has suddenly become a lot more volatile. What are we heading for? I don't know. I really don't. My sort of things to watch are resources. The world is not getting any bigger. Resources aren't getting any more. So going into things like organizations that are delivering renewable energies, whether they are people like Shell or BP, or those big organizations. You think, oh yes, but they're doing oil. Well, no, they're not. They're doing a lot of wind farming, hydrogen kind of thing. So renewable energies. I'm not a fan of putting all your eggs in one basket. So I think nuclear and carbon-based energy is still very, very important. It's not something you can get rid of because that's just not the way it works. So we've got to have those kind of things. So resources and energy are two of the big things in the world if you wanted to be a part of an industry. We're always going to require people who do things like artificial intelligence and moving technology forward. My worry here is that a lot of the jobs that we currently have and have in the past will disappear because of artificial intelligence. And they're the kind of jobs that are actually the fun bits. AI doesn't seem to be doing the dullard jobs, if you see what I mean. It'll write a book, or it'll do write a poem, or it'll draw a picture, or it'll do the stuff that actually we all quite enjoy, but it won't do the boring manual stuff that you won't go and make me a cup of tea. It's like, well, hang on a minute, it's taking all the nice stuff out of my world, but actually still leaving me with the hard things. And that comes around to a lot of the practical jobs out there. So the engineer in me says, well, AI and computers is not going to do plumbing. It's not going to do electrics. It's not going to become a builder that's going to put bricks and mortar in the ground. It can't do any of that and never will be able to do that. So those are the kind of trades which are very, very important and can't be replaced through other means. But I think the key thing with all of this is most people won't know what they actually want to do until they meet late 20s, early 30s. Okay, you're going to do a lot of different jobs. I think it's really bad when they force people of your age to go, right, this is what you're going to do. What do you want to do for the rest of your life? Well, I don't know. I've got no idea. At that age, I had no idea, but I thought I had to make a decision. And when I couldn't become a fast jet pilot, the whole world just disintegrated around me. So forcing people to make a decision that early without all the good information that is out there is not so good. So I think the key thing is to be enthusiastic, put energy into everything that you're doing, be kind to the people around you, and make the most of whatever job that you end up doing, because you will make that job good or bad. The job itself can be absolutely anything. And it might not necessarily be the job that you're going to end up doing in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, whatever it might be. Have that ability. Don't funnel yourself into one particular bit. If I may, just with a last sort of anecdote on that, is being in a very sort of technical world, I see people who get very, very good at doing a specific thing. They might become a very good CAD person doing computer-aided design. They might become very good at wiring the back of computers or whatever that might be. But because they're very, very good at it, that's all they'll ever do for the rest of their careers. So if you become very, very good at something, the chances are that's all you're going to be able to do for the rest of your life. So if you can become okay at lots of things and have an understanding of lots of things and put energy and enthusiasm into lots of things, then the world is your oyster. You can do absolutely anything you want to do. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing over here, that's fine, because you can actually do lots of other things. So you can move careers and go off and do something completely different. It's kind of like, there's one thing: energy and enthusiasm. Throw that into everything you do, and the world will be a much better place.
And we've come to the end. Thank you very much for the interview.
My pleasure. It really was a great honor to speak to you and your audience.
And thank you very much for everyone for watching this interview.